Next on Country Life, I'm taking you to a science lab in New Zealand's geothermal heartland of Rotorua.
Oh, so we've got to our lab coats.
Okay. Thank you. I paid a visit to the Crown Research Institute Scion to talk to the scientists and collaborators, hoping to create a new industry that might help lower carbon emissions and feed the world's growing population by essentially creating stock feed from bugs. Microbes chowing down on waste gas from geothermal plants is key to the technology, which it's estimated could reap $500 million a year for New Zealand by 2045. I've just put on my lab coat and we're just going to go into one of the labs here at Scion just to see what's actually happening at the moment in terms of the research, and glasses are going on too.
It's going to get very noisy over there.
Scion's microbial biotech team lead, Christophe Collet, is showing me what stage they're at.
These are our mini bioreactors, and as you can see, there's 4 of them, so we can test slightly different conditions. And we are using gas substrates that come over here, that contain CO2, and it's being fed into the bioreactors. And here you can see we can monitor so many different parameters like temperature, oxygen, dissolved oxygen, and how much CO2 is coming out in the off gas, how much is being used, and we can trend how well the biomass is growing.
The protein-rich organic material jiggling around in the bioreactors is generated by some tough little bugs, a bacteria and an algae found in geothermal areas, which consume carbon dioxide and methane, 2 of the gases that just happen to be responsible for global warming. Is that the biomass in that, what looks like a smoothie bottle, bubbling away?
And you can see it's slightly pinkish.
Yes.
So that means there's a good amount of biomass in there. So that means we are ready for harvesting very soon.
So the gas is what's flowing in there and making it bubble up and swirl around?
That's correct. The high pitch is the stirring for mixing. So we get a good gas transfer from the gas bubble to the microbes, so they can eat it more efficiently.
It's kind of like what happens in those boiling mud pools and springs we see around the volcanic plateau. They're basically munching away on the gas.
That's correct.
And then what happens?
So once we are happy with our best conditions here, we can reproduce the similar conditions in the larger bioreactor. And that will give us already a step closer to the larger bioreactor we want to build in Taupo at the geothermal plant. So we are starting already the scale up here in the laboratory, and then when we are happy with our results, we can transfer to the larger bioreactors to be built.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's find out how the whole idea started about a decade ago.
Yeah, no, there were nerds that were going through bioprospecting all of the geothermal hot springs and ground as a project called 1,000 Springs.
This is Andy Blair of the geothermal research and innovation company Upflow, which is helping bring the project to fruition.
They were sampling these hot springs and steaming ground for microbes, and so they had a whole library of information about microbes and thought, yeah, what can we do with these things? They exist in these hot springs and these environments together naturally, and they're used to the gases that exist there naturally, and so they do this as a natural process. So geothermal environments can be toxic, high temperature, a whole lot of things that make them what we call extremophiles. So they live in extreme environments, and those bodily adaptations are useful for biotech. And so that's why, we're looking for solutions in the world using those bodily adaptations in the way that they function.
And that led to the idea of turning the protein-rich biomass produced by the greenhouse gas-eating microbes into something useful and nutritious, like stock feed, turning something that's a problem into something of value. Here's Scion's Alec Foster.
So the feed would look like pellets. We would effectively spin down the cells in a big fermenter and would get like a mass, and we'd dry that out and we'd pelletize it. So just as you feed pellets to chickens or to various sorts of animals, that's the type of product we would make. But we'd also be able to possibly make some higher value products as well. So those higher value products could be supplements, could go into all sorts of different applications, nutraceuticals, and these represent another real high value opportunity which we're going to be exploring.
And what sort of nutritional value would these pellets have, say, for chickens or sheep?
They've got a spectrum of amino acids, and those amino acids are essential. We tend to think of it as being maybe a bit unusual to be eating bacteria, but actually animals do it every day. One animal eats another, which eats another, and eventually you get to a cow. And this is effectively the same nutritional content, and it's something which animals actually quite like to eat.
How expensive would it be for farmers?
We would expect it to be at least price competitive to what's existing on the market.
And when might they be able to buy this stuff?
That's a good question. I would hope within 5 to 10 years that we'd be able to make it commercial.
Could it be used for dairy cows as a replacement for palm kernel, for instance?
Possibly, yes. We'd have to do analysis on cows to actually see whether it is beneficial. That's also part of what we're going to be doing, is analysing how do different animals respond to the different feedstocks.
Have you tested it on animals yet?
We've only done it with mice trials at the moment. From memory, the weights were comparable or better with our feed. So that the mice were happy to eat it, and they bulked up just as they would with normal feed.
Part of the initial uses of gases is where we formed the idea, but we also learnt that in 2018, 3 million tonnes of feed was imported into New Zealand from two major locations, which is Sumatra and Borneo. And we knew that they come from palm oil plantations, and that was quite horrifying for us to hear, that New Zealand, that pride ourselves as a clean, green production country and doing smart, making ethical decisions, was contributing to such a large-scale deforestation and other activities. And there's so much carbon loaded in the transport of that to New Zealand. And we thought, when we were looking at, what the bugs can do and what they make, we thought, here's an opportunity to target some of that. We're not sure yet if it's going to be bulk enough to really get in the way of PKE, but we definitely know it's going to add something of value to value feed. So it might not be a bulk offering, but it might be, add to the specialist sort of areas of, what's important in feed and for premium feed products.
Back in the lab, I wanted to find out what the stuff looked like.
It looks like a bit of a pinkish jelly. So it looks like food grade, actually, like you would be tempted to use it in your kitchen.
Yeah, a good example would be Marmite. That's effectively yeast extract. So that's effectively what we're doing. So instead of ours being brown, ours is a nice pink colour that animals like to eat.
Depends if the two microbes are kept together, but if they're separated, they are two very distinct colours. One is pinkish and the other one is dark green.
Looks like icing, plasticky looking icing.
Oh, yeah.
Like you could age
Like
cake
you could
with
go...
it. Yeah, that's right.
So that's the wet paste before drying.
So whether it's pellets or powder, we're waiting for the market to tell us. We think pellets because in our brain we think animals eat pellets. That's because we're not animal scientists. But the market's going to tell us how they want to receive it and what it looks like. Cows might like Marmite, who knows? And if they want it, I'm sure we can give it to them in
They
Marmite.
might want it in a block that they can lick.
That's
perhaps.
right, who knows? Yeah.
As Christophe mentioned, the various partners in this project are now intent on scaling up, getting out of the lab and building a pilot plant where real geothermal gases would be used to generate much bigger quantities of the product.
Our goal is that we stand up a project here in New Zealand. We produce something to be added to feedstock for local feed in New Zealand, and it could be for dairy, it could be for poultry, it could be for salmon. We're not sure yet, that's part of the question. And then we plug it into 10 geothermal power stations in New Zealand, and we produce our New Zealand's feed from that. And then our ultimate goal is to deploy that overseas. And so we can produce food in market. So let's plug into geothermal power stations in the US, in Indonesia, in China, in Europe, so that we can still be an export food country that's decarbonised. Because New Zealand produces food for 40 million people a year, and people eat animals. And so we want to support that protein access to food global deployment plan. We need to understand how to manage different gas compositions from every different power station. They're always different. We need to look at the middle and the technologies, whether we're using, photobioreactors, fermenters, how do we put them together to produce the sort of output that we need. Then we also need to understand the marketplaces. So where is it meaningful for this kind of material in which market, and how do we deliver it?
Would you envisage, say, big fermenters set up around the place?
Could be one thing that we make, could be different bits of kit. The problem is not what does the kit look like, it's what can we produce, and then how can we produce it as an meaningful and relevant economic place.
A Māori-owned trust, Tauhara North No. 2, and the Ministry for Primary Industries have gone in 50-50 to fund the $5 million 4-year project to figure out whether and how it can become commercially viable.
Andy, what difference will this make if it comes to fruition at scale?
This will decarbonise feed production in Aotearoa and an option for the world, and it will mean that we can feel good about participating in ecosystems, food production systems that are not harming the planet that we want to have in the future. So for us, it's about offering a decarbonised, meaningful commercial operation that is sustainable and good for planet and people.
For me, it's really New Zealand positioning itself at the forefront of food and feed. We can be global leaders in such technology, and I think this is key as we move forward. Being able to capture carbon dioxide, being able to generate new and innovative products is essential. So I think this is fantastic, and I think it really does put us at the leading edge.
Alec Foster. Before joining Scion, he led one of Europe's largest synthetic biology programs, developing new materials with genetically engineered microorganisms. But he says the process outlined in the story doesn't rely on genetic engineering or gene editing at all, simply the natural microbes eating the gas. I was also talking to Andy Blair of Upflow and Christophe Collet, also from Scion.